You've probably come across the name Churchill, famously associated with Winston Churchill. And undoubtedly, you're familiar with Princess Diana, one of the most beloved members of the royal family before her tragic passing. But here's a fascinating fact you might not know. Diana, the Princess of Wales, and Winston Churchill were actually distant cousins.
When you think of British aristocrats, you envision fading portraits of forgotten earls gathering dust in country manors. The Spencer-Churchills, Britain's most iconic dynasty, demand a different frame entirely. Your understanding of world history shifts when you realize how often this single family stood at critical turning points, from the war rooms of World War II and the humanitarian frontlines of the 1990s. While ordinary nobles inherited their positions, the Spencer-Churchills seized theirs through a combination of military genius, political cunning, and an uncanny ability to position themselves at power's epicenter. Indeed, their family crest might as well read reinvention, transforming from wool merchants to military commanders, from political outcasts to prime ministers, from shy nursery teachers to global humanitarian icons. Thus, in today's episode of Old Money Luxury, we'll trace the remarkable journey of a family that didn't just witness history, they wrote it, often with their own blood, sweat, and calculated ambition. If you weren't born a Spencer-Churchill in 18th century Britain, you might as well have been playing life with a broken deck of cards. While the rest of us would have been thrilled with a decent meal and a roof that didn't leak, these aristocratic overachievers were busy collecting palaces as casually as you collect streaming subscriptions. Between the late 17th and early 19th centuries, the Spencer-Churchills were the original influencers of their day, minus the tedious Instagram posts about avocado toast. And when they merged through marriage, it wasn't just a wedding. It was a seismic power grab that made modern corporate mergers look like children trading lunch snacks. The family's most illustrious military commander, John Churchill, 1st Duke of Marlborough, reshaped European history at Blenheim and beyond, earning himself that magnificent palace that still stands as a monument to calculated ambition. And speaking of monuments, let's not forget that this same bloodline later produced Sir Winston Churchill, who steered Britain through its darkest hour with nothing but cigars, brandy, and an unwavering refusal to surrender. More recently, Diana, Princess of Wales, yes, that Spencer girl, captured global hearts before her tragic end, proving the family's ability to command attention didn't diminish with centuries. Picture Blenheim Palace, not your average country cottage, mind you, but a symbol of excess so grand that it makes Buckingham Palace look like servant quarters. Set in thousands of acres of meticulously landscaped parkland, this architectural behemoth stands as testament to what unlimited wealth and a healthy dose of royal favour can achieve. Their London townhouses weren't just homes, they were command centres where the fate of nations was decided over brandy and cigars. When a Spencer-Churchill whispered in Parliament, ministers trembled. When they hosted a ball, even royalty checked their calendars. Charles Spencer, 3rd Earl of Sunderland, didn't just participate in government. He essentially ran it as Lord President of the Council and First Lord of the Treasury. Meanwhile, Sarah, Duchess of Marlborough, manipulated Queen Anne with such finesse that for years the monarchy operated as a de facto Spencer-Churchill subsidiary, and their wealth multiplied like rabbits in springtime. What began with Sir John Spencer's shrewd investments in wool evolved into a diversified portfolio that would impress modern hedge fund managers. Land, political appointments, strategic marriages. They played the long game of aristocratic wealth accumulation with masterful precision. Yes, indeed, while the masses scrabbled for survival, the Spencer-Churchills dined off gold plate. Their children were raised not to question if they would rule, but merely which spheres of influence they would choose to dominate. But beneath the gilded exteriors and commanding presence lay family origins far more humble than their regal bearing might suggest. How did sheep farmers transform into kingmakers? John Churchill, 1st Duke of Marlborough, transformed himself from modest Devon gentry into the architect of British military supremacy through sheer cunning and calculated charm. Born in 1650 to fading aristocracy, he learned early that loyalty was merely another currency in the great exchange of power. As page to the future James II, he navigated court politics with the precision of a master fencer, never committing so deeply that he couldn't pivot when necessary. When William of Orange seized the throne during the Glorious Revolution, Churchill switched allegiances with such elegant timing that even his critics grudgingly admired his survival instincts. Branded a traitor by some, he responded with a soldier's pragmatism that his service belonged to England rather than whoever temporarily wore its crown. His ascent to power combined tactical brilliance with a disarming personal magnetism that left both allies and enemies perpetually off balance. During diplomatic missions across Europe, he astonished French generals by memorizing their fortress defenses while simultaneously charming them into complacency, a dual expertise that would serve him throughout his career. Yet his most formidable weapon wasn't his military acumen, but his marriage to Sarah Jennings, whose intelligence and ferocity matched his own in every measure.
Duke of York, Marlborough benefited from receiving his first military commission from the Duke, and later from further promotions, until when James was king, he was risen to the rank of Brigadier General and assisted in brutally suppressing the Duke of Monmouth's rebellion against the Catholic James in 1685.
Their union in 1677 created not merely a marriage, but a political juggernaut that would reshape European history. Sarah infiltrated Princess Anne's inner circle with razor-sharp wit, transforming what began as court friendship into unprecedented access to royal power. The mentally fragile Anne, who would later become queen, developed such dependency that she addressed Sarah as Mrs. Freeman in correspondence, dripping with emotional neediness. Sarah exploited this attachment ruthlessly, manipulating royal finances and court appointments while her husband conquered battlefields across the continent. When John needed war funds, Sarah raided royal coffers without hesitation or permission. When parliamentary enemies plotted against him, she dismantled their schemes through whispered conversations in palace corridors. Their partnership seemed unstoppable until ambition finally outpaced even their considerable talents and connections. John's military genius culminated at the Battle of Blenheim in 1704, a gamble so audacious it permanently altered Europe's balance of power. He marched his exhausted troops 250 miles across 5 grueling weeks to trap French forces in Bavaria against all military convention. His cavalry charges proved so recklessly brilliant that seasoned officers wept at their apparent suicide mission, until they witnessed its devastating effectiveness. By nightfall, 34,000 French soldiers lay dead or captured, and Churchill returned to England not merely a general, but a living legend. Queen Anne rewarded him with a dukedom and commissioned Blenheim Palace, a monumental Baroque masterpiece designed to immortalize his triumph. By the early 19th century, however, the Spencer-Churchill narrative had deteriorated from glory to cautionary tale. Blenheim Palace, once the ultimate symbol of military and political supremacy, crumbled from neglect while tourists wandered its faded grandeur, the family retreating to its shadowy corners. The third Duke gambled away entire forests and villages with careless dice throws. The fifth Duke, infamously known as the Mad Marquis, scandalized London society by marrying a dancer coincidentally named Susan Churchill, their shared surname spawning years of salacious rumors despite no blood relation. His son, the sixth Duke, squandered what remained on spectacularly failed ventures, including a steam-powered lawnmower that exploded, taking substantial portions of the palace gardens with it. When the seventh Duke inherited the title in 1857, the family reputation lay in tatters, until his third son Randolph staked everything on a Brooklyn-born heiress. 24-year-old Randolph Churchill, perpetually bankrupt but irresistibly charming, spotted Jenny Jerome at a sailing regatta in Cowes and pursued her with reckless abandon. Her father, Leonard Jerome, the self-made King of Wall Street, observed the courtship with amused skepticism. The Churchills possessed titles but little else. Beneath Randolph's aristocratic veneer lurked feverishly bright eyes and caustic wit, sharper than his family's ceremonial swords. His letters promised Jenny a countess's coronet and life grander than American millions could purchase, conveniently omitting the mountain of family debt such grandeur required. Their hasty Paris wedding in 1874 occurred with Jenny 7 months pregnant with Winston. The ceremony so rushed that the priest omitted half the traditional service. Their marriage fused American ambition with British desperation. Jerome money repaired Blenheim's leaking roof and settled pressing debts while Randolph stormed Parliament with manic intensity. His vicious attacks on Prime Minister Gladstone earned him the nickname Young Rattlesnake, among colleagues both impressed and alarmed by his tactics. By 1886, he'd clawed his way to Chancellor of the Exchequer, treating the position not as pinnacle, but stepping stone. He demanded cabinet meetings conform to his schedule, threatened resignation over trivial slights, and once hurled an inkpot at a secretary who questioned his financial calculations. The spectacular fall came swiftly. Randolph resigned in December 1886, certain the government would beg for his return. They didn't. Whispers about his deteriorating health circulated through Westminster as slurred speech, uncontrollable rages, and trembling hands betrayed the untreatable syphilis consuming his brilliant mind. While her husband descended into paranoid decline, Jenny blossomed as London's most captivating American import. She exchanged witticisms with Oscar Wilde and future monarchs in exclusive clubs, her legendary pearls catching candlelight as she effortlessly switched between 3 languages. The Prince of Wales, future King Edward VII and notorious pleasure seeker, lingered at her dinner parties long after other guests departed. As Randolph deteriorated into a suspicious wraith hurling accusations at servants, their sons Winston and Jack faded from parental attention. She busied herself cultivating power brokers, securing minor diplomatic posts to occupy Randolph's diminishing faculties, and discreetly borrowing money from former lovers to maintain her lavish wardrobe. Their spectacular decline would cast a long shadow over their eldest son, who would grow obsessed with restoring the family's name through any means necessary. Winston Churchill transformed himself from a stuttering schoolboy into the 20th century's most formidable statesman through sheer force of will and an unshakable belief in his own destiny. Relegated to the bottom of his class at Harrow, he found refuge in toy soldiers rather than textbooks, collecting early dismissals and academic disappointments, while his nanny Mrs. Everest whispered that greatness awaited him. At 18, he chose Sandhurst Military Academy not from patriotic fervour, but practical calculation. No Greek or mathematics required for cavalry officers. His military career became a deliberate quest for fame across the globe's most dangerous frontiers, the jungles of Cuba, India's northwest frontier, and Sudan's merciless deserts. His self-authored war dispatches read like adventure novels, carefully crafting his public image until his dramatic capture during the Boer War in 1899 catapulted him to international celebrity. His escape, scaling a latrine wall, trekking 300 miles across enemy territory, and stowing away on a freight train, transformed a minor aristocrat into a household name overnight. Politics followed naturally for a man who believed in the transformative power of language, winning his first parliamentary seat in 1900 as a Conservative before defecting to the Liberals with characteristic audacity. As First Lord of the Admiralty in 1911, he revolutionized the Royal Navy, championing aircraft carriers and converting the fleet from coal to oil, despite entrenched opposition from traditionalists. His brilliant mind often overreached, most catastrophically at Gallipoli in 1915, when his bold strategy to attack the Ottoman Empire collapsed into a bloody disaster, costing 46,000 Allied lives. Professionally devastated and publicly humiliated, he retreated to paint landscapes while battling what he called the black dog of depression that stalked him throughout his life. The 1930s found him transformed into a political Cassandra, warning of Nazi Germany's growing threat, while Britain celebrated Chamberlain's paper promises of peace in our time. His most prophetic rebuke, "You had the choice between war and dishonor, you chose dishonor and you will have war," haunted Chamberlain as Hitler's blitzkrieg confirmed Churchill's every prediction. When he finally claimed the premiership at 65, Churchill's leadership combined theatrical inspiration with street fighter determination. His radio addresses transformed Britain's collective fear into steely resolve, particularly his "We shall fight on the beaches, we shall never surrender" speech that still echoes through history. Behind closed doors, he wept over mounting casualties and fortified himself with whiskey, muttering, "If this is victory, may God spare us from defeat," as Singapore fell to Japanese forces. Victory exacted a devastating physical toll, aging him decades in just 5 years and leaving him frail enough that voters unceremoniously expelled him from office in 1945. This political exile freed him to pursue literary greatness, producing histories and memoirs of such quality that the Nobel Committee awarded him its prize for literature.
Sir Winston's prize was then presented by King Gustav. The Nobel Award for Literature includes a book and a medal in addition to the sum of £12,000.
The dynasty's other 20th century colossus emerged unexpectedly when a shy nursery teacher with a fondness for polka dots captured Prince Charles's attention. Diana Spencer's 1981 royal wedding featured a 25-foot train and 750 million viewers worldwide, less a marriage than a coronation. Behind palace walls, the fairy tale disintegrated as Charles maintained his relationship with Camilla Parker Bowles, while 20-year-old Diana battled bulimia and depression.
Diana visited a school in South Korea and sat side by side with the young students. In Bosnia, the Princess of Wales displayed her tenderness, holding hands with children she met on the trip and embracing them in her arms.
Diana weaponized her vulnerability and transformed royal protocols when she touched AIDS patients without gloves at London's Middlesex Hospital, while the Windsors maintained their distance behind formal handshakes. She walked through Angolan minefields wearing protective gear, generating global pressure that culminated in an international ban on landmines. Without flinching, she knelt beside Indonesian leprosy patients, touching their disfigured limbs while cameras captured the moment for an astonished world. The palace bristled at her rule-breaking, but global audiences embraced her authentic compassion that made centuries of royal reserve seem suddenly obsolete.
For the increase of mankind, according to the will of God, and that children might be brought up in the fear and nurture of the Lord, and to the praise of his holy name.
Her 1995 Panorama interview shattered royal illusions when she acknowledged both Charles's infidelity and her own affair with cavalry officer James Hewitt. Her most devastating line, "There were 3 of us in this marriage," forced the Queen's hand, resulting in a formal divorce that stripped Diana of her HRH title, but amplified her popular appeal.
Do you think Mrs. Parker Bowles was a factor in the breakdown of your marriage?
Well, there were 3 of us in this marriage, so it was a bit crowded.
Free from royal constraints, she auctioned her ball gowns for charity and amplified her humanitarian work, leveraging celebrity to spotlight global suffering. Diana's legacy lives on through Prince William's mental health advocacy and Prince Harry's campaign against invasive media, both inherited from a mother who understood personal pain could become public purpose.
The coffin is adorned in a flag with the royal standard. On top, white lilies, Diana's favourite flower.
These 2 extraordinary Spencer-Churchills, Winston and Diana, achieved greatness through seemingly contradictory qualities. His through uncompromising force, hers through revolutionary vulnerability. Winston saved democracy through authoritarian willpower, while Diana humanized monarchy by exposing its flaws. Churchill conquered external enemies with rhetoric and strategy, while Diana triumphed over internal palace resistance through authenticity and compassion. Winston mastered the art of war, Diana the power of empathy, proving the dynasty could produce both lions and lambs. Their achievements stand as monuments to the family's extraordinary adaptability. Winston rescued the empire through traditionalist determination, while Diana helped dismantle royal artifice through radical honesty. The price of such transformative greatness, however, proved steeper than either could have imagined, exacting physical, emotional, and psychological costs that would ultimately consume them both. Behind the Spencer-Churchills' glittering achievements lurked shadows of controversy and personal demons that threatened to unravel their carefully constructed dynasty. Winston's political wilderness years branded him a warmonger as he stood virtually alone against Hitler's appeasement, his warnings dismissed until Europe burned. His strategic blunder at Gallipoli haunted him throughout his career, the deaths of 46,000 Allied soldiers hanging like a spectre over his reputation. His most private battle raged against the black dog of depression that drove him to paint landscapes obsessively and consume prodigious quantities of alcohol as self-medication. The voters' rejection in 1945, despite his wartime leadership, left him temporarily broken, a warrior without a war as Britain embraced socialism over imperial nostalgia. Diana's struggles played out under merciless tabloid scrutiny, her eating disorders and depression trivialized as attention-seeking behavior by palace courtiers who prized stoicism above all. Her desperate attempts to capture notice, including throwing herself downstairs, were dismissed as theatrical by a royal household pathologically committed to emotional suppression. Both these towering Spencer-Churchills found themselves trapped by fame they had partly engineered. Winston imprisoned by his wartime persona, Diana by the princess fantasy she initially embraced but couldn't sustain. Their most profound similarity emerged in their willingness to risk everything on principle. Winston gambling his political career on anti-appeasement warnings, Diana sacrificing royal protection to pursue humanitarian work on her own terms. Each paid dearly for their convictions, experiencing devastating personal costs that remained largely hidden behind carefully maintained public facades. Blenheim Palace stands today as a magnificent mausoleum to these past glories and struggles, its honey-coloured stone walls containing 3 centuries of ambition, scandal, and reinvention.
A long hall leads through a series of richly decorated staterooms. These sumptuous rooms are lined with portraits of past dukes. This is number 4 and his family. Photos of the present duke's family are a reminder that the palace is still lived in. Several dukes were rocked in this ornate cradle as babies.
Charles James Spencer-Churchill, 12th Duke of Marlborough, presides over this UNESCO World Heritage Site with the pragmatic resignation of a modern CEO rather than an aristocratic custodian. The 21st century Duke hosts Beyoncé music video shoots and corporate safari dinners to fund perpetual repairs to crumbling stonework, history's maintenance fees proving as relentless as they are astronomical. Winston Churchill and Princess Diana, though connected only through the most tenuous genealogical threads, share more than distant bloodlines in modern British consciousness. Their DNA lives on not merely in direct descendants, but in cultural inheritance. Winston's great-grandson, Randolph Churchill, channeled his ancestors' theatrical defiance in 2014 when he helicopter-landed on a Russian Arctic oil rig, brandishing environmental editorials until security forcibly removed him. Princess Charlotte, Diana's granddaughter, reveals her grandmother's compassionate instincts when she removes her gloves to hold the hand of a chemotherapy patient, instinctively recognizing that royal protocol means nothing when measured against human suffering. Today's Spencer-Churchills have scattered into diverse professional realms. Lady Henrietta Spencer-Churchill declined royal wedding invitations to pursue interior design in Dubai. Cousin Jack abandoned aristocratic expectations entirely, forming a punk rock band before establishing a falconry school in Wales, where birds of prey respond to commands blasted over the Clash recordings. What binds these disparate descendants isn't title or property, but an inherited resilience, a genetic predisposition toward reinvention that has shepherded the family through civil wars, bankruptcies, and tabloid-feeding frenzies. And now, we'd love to see you in the comments. Were you aware of just how influential this one family was? Or is this your first time hearing about them in full? We can't wait to hear your thoughts. And with that said, thanks for joining us for another episode of Old Money Luxury. Cheers until the next time.